Bechlal, when it comes to Fabrengen, you say L'chaim, usually comes along with saying L'chaim with Yontif. But this time, this is Fabrengen, not altogether of Yontif. Im Yirtz Hashem, soon, we'll look back on Chof Ches Nisan, which is one of the days that was caused the Yiseiris in the Inyan of Mashiach and Mela, that will become a Yontif, so then it'll be Yontif. But the value, it's only a day, as man of Yiseiris, that we have to be in a Yiseiris in the Inyonim that the Rebbe said 30 years ago. So this is something that has to cause a Yiseiris every year, but especially when it's 30 years, is a special day. The Rebbe would make a fuss over that. A lot of Inyonim, when it came to the 30th year, that this is special and all kinds of biyurim. What's the mile of the Shleish Shona? But what has to happen is we have to put ourselves back into the Matzav the way we felt. Bishas the Rebbe said that Sicha. Actually, I thought it wasn't by the Sicha. It was in Miami, obviously. But we heard the hookup, we heard the Sicha, and it shook up everyone. That's the truth. Bechlal, that Sicha shook up Gans Lubavitch. For days, people were living with this impression of that Sicha. It shook everyone up to know. The Rebbe said the things that he said, that what he did was Lehevev Olarik and Ben Peil Mashiach and the Inyonim in the hearts that the Rebbe spoke. It shook everybody up. And the feeling that you had then is that you have to do something to what the Rebbe wants in this Inyan to help and make that Mashiach will come. And that feeling was real. And Hayom Ha'Me'elo Niskorim V'Nasim. So what it is, you have to have Niskorim and you have to have Nasim. You have to relive what the way we felt then. And those that were not born yet and didn't live this, but heard from others. So we have to relive. And the Rebbe spoke something that was negated to him, Ad Mosai HaNefesh. It requires that we should make a Cheshbon HaNefesh. We, every single one of us, has to make a Cheshbon HaNefesh. What are we doing? What did we do till now? What are we doing right there? B'negei Inyonim that the Rebbe spoke then. I remember when the Rebbe, this was not b'negei this Inyan, but when the Rebbe taught the Nigen, Stavya Pitu, Simchas Torah Tov Shem Chav Gimel, the Seder used to be always that he would teach the Nigen Simchas Torah Fartog, and then by the next day, by the Fabrengen, he would sing it again. So I remember, and this always would, when I talk about Cheshbon Nefesh, it always comes back to my mind, the Tziyur, that when the Rebbe taught the Nigen again, Simchas Torah by the Fabrengen, and when he came to the part, Oy Cheshbon Tzedek O Davati, so the Rebbe said it like this. He sang from the beginning, and he got to this part, he said, Oy Cheshbon Tzedek, and he stopped, and he said, Das meint me mir, und dir. He showed three parts of the shul. And when the Rebbe said those words, he saw the Rebbe looked at everybody and pointed at three people, actually, but three parts of the shul, which included everybody. And that brought the feeling that you have to make a cheshbon nefesh. So if you have to make a cheshbon nefesh b'chlal and something that's so important, and something that's so great and so special, avada, we have to make a cheshbon nefesh. And not only mitzad us, it was very special because what the Rebbe said, mitzad the Rebbe this was. I know that a few days later in that settle that someone wrote something to the Rebbe answered, I don't remember even what it was about. I don't even know if I heard what it was about, but the answer was about something, and he wrote, Ki meduber behasicha hayedua. The Rebbe referred to this Sicha that he said, Chof Ches Nisan, hasicha hayedua. This is the famous Sicha hayedua metahei hayediyah. So by the Rebbe, it was something very, very important, very, very special. So certainly we have to make a cheshbon nefesh. What are we doing about it? What did we do till now? And what are we doing now? And what are we planning to do weiter? But before that, just to go through a little bit in the Teichen of what the Rebbe said then, and go through some things which we have to understand, which I'm sure it's Poshet the Zachen, and I'm sure everyone knows, understands it, but it's kedai just to go through. One of the things that Rebbe said, that whatever he did till now is lo hevel v'lorik. And the only thing is left over, etc., etc. What is the pshat that the Rebbe said that what he did till now is lehevel v'lorik? What does that mean? Actually, the way we heard then that Rabbi Chadakov, I think that night or the next day, wrote a zettel to the Rebbe. He wrote a zettel to the Rebbe writing, what does the Rebbe mean lehevel v'lorik? Look what the Rebbe did. I don't know exactly what he wrote, but he expressed that the Rebbe even can't develop. And the Rebbe saying lehevel v'lorik. I don't know if the Rebbe answered him or what answered him. I know I didn't hear. But this is something very important. And also, was a pshat, he can do it and we could do it. And he said, and you could do it. So just to explain Pashup Pshat, by the Rebbe, as long as Mashiach did not come b'peil mamish, it's nothing. Now, you can't say nothing because if 99% was done and you're only left with 1%, or but lepeil mamish, as long as it's not there b'peil, by the Rebbe, this was negay, and he called it leheve v'larik. Leheve v'larik means legabe de maisa b'peil, nit chas v'sholom leheve v'larik. Legabe de maisa b'peil of Mashiach. Like the Rebbe tells the story of the Rebbe Marash, who there was a ketz for a certain year, and the Mashiach will come. And the Rebbe Marash asked his father at Tzemach Tzedek, so Mashiach didn't come. So he said, "Mit ogidruk dem lukut Torah," and that's a Geula of Mashiach. So the Rebbe Marash says to him, "Aber midav hoben Mashiach b'peil," and the Rebbe told the story quite a few times because the ikir is the geya b'peil mamish, and that's what the Rebbe meant, that it's lehevel v'larik, meaning legabe de maisa b'peil, because it didn't accomplish. We know the klal ein ha mitzvah nikras ela al Shem gemro. That's the chazal, that a mitzvah is the credit is given to the one that finishes it, even though somebody else did most of it and made it possible. But the last little thing, that's what counts. We find it in the opposite direction also. In halacha, by a beir, the din by a beir is that if someone falls into a beir and gets hurt, you're chayiv, but it's only certain things, a beir that's 10 tefachim deep. And the din is if somebody chayfer beir test tefachim, ubo acher v'yishlim elei asoro, and someone got a hezek, ha'achrin chayiv. He only made the last little bit, but that's what counts. So by the Rebbe Poshet wanted Mashiach b'peil mamish, and as long as it didn't happen, by the Rebbe he called it leheve v'larik. It's not really chas v'sholem leheve v'larik. It's like the Rebbe explained many times that b'chlal, how do we expect that days before Greis Tzadikim, Hechere Eden didn't bring Mashiach, and we are going to bring it? The answer is it's a nanis al gabanok. He said it's like a midget on top of the shoulder of a giant. So the midget could see further, even though he's small. Why? Because he's on top of the shoulders of the giant. So the Rebbe, the days before, and especially the Rebbe, what he did, that's the giant. So he did everything. But Lepel Mamish, the last thing is that something that he wants us to do. And he wants us to do, even if we do a little bit. Like the famous Medrash, and the Rebbe quoted many times, that Rebbe Lozer, I think, was going to Eretz Yerushalayim, and he wanted to bring a matana to the Beis Hamikdash, and he saw a big rock. He felt it would be useful for the Beis Hamikdash. He wanted to bring it, but he couldn't bring it. It was too big. Mitamol Malachim came dressed like people, guys like people, and they said to him, we should take it for you? He said, sure. So they told him, but you put under an etzbaktana, put your pinky under it and help us. And the Rebbe asked, what's his pinky going to help? He can't do it. But you need to do an etzbaktana. So we're only an etzbaktana. But the Eibishter wants, and that's what the Rebbe wants, that we should do it. And as long as that didn't happen, so it's ki'ilu, it's leheve v'larik, but not chas v'sholom leheve v'larik. The Rebbe wouldn't say words which are poshet not emes. And some people time it and sadanivis, as pasnish, there's no such thing. This is emes, because like the Rebbe, legabe the ma'aseh b'peil, the coming of Mashiach b'peil, that's what counts. And that he gave over to our hands, and he said, this is what I wanted to do. And what did the Rebbe say he wants us to do? So there are two things, basically. In the Sichos, in the weeks later, the Rebbe said he meant you should learn the Inyonei Geula Umoshiach, learn it in Nigla, learn it in Chassidus, and Likut Sichos, learn it in the Siderenu, to learn the Inyonei Mashiach. But then there's another thing that the Rebbe said on the spot, B'shas he said the Sicha. The taina was, why didn't Mashiach come take? And B'meile, if the chesoron he explained what the chesoron is, versteht man, in order to make Mashiach come, we got to fix that chesoron. What was the chesoron? That we meint es nicht mit Emes. We meint es nicht mit Emes. And if you have a few people, was meint mit Emes, what Mashiach kommen. So what he wanted is two things. We should want Mashiach mit Emes. It should really be truthfully, really. And we should learn Inyonei Geula Umoshiach. So the Chura, it's two separate Inyonim, but it's not two separate Inyonim. Learning the Inyonim of Geula Umoshiach, and especially the way it's in Chassidus, and especially the way it's in Likut Sichos by the Rebbe, it makes you understand what is the Inyonim of that. What is Mashiach? What is the time of Mashiach? To really understand it. When you really understand it, then you want it. It's impossible to want something with an emes if you don't know what it is. If you don't know what it is and you don't see the gracekeit in it and what's so special about it, why would you want it? So if you don't learn and you don't know what the Inyonim are, certainly you can't want mit an Emes. Von zweiten Seite, if you do learn, it's impossible not to want mit an Emes. Because it's impossible for someone who knows that something is so good and not to want it. And something that's good to want. The famous word of the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash said, the drei Sachen that have to pale. When you drink mashke, you have to get drunk. If you have money, muss man werden meshugge. Amilen chsidis, muss man haben aber wie I said, we see sometimes somebody has a lot of money and he's nicht meshugge because he doesn't have enough. For him, he needs a little bit more. You see a guy who drinks mashke and doesn't get drunk, he didn't drink enough. You see somebody who learns chassidus and doesn't get ava v'yira because he didn't learn enough. But if you learn enough and you really understand it, it's impossible. Like the Rambam says, Ezi derech la'avosi v'yirosei. What's the derech of avos Hashem and yiras Hashem? L'keshei yizbeinen. If you think and you think, you will automatically come. It can't work any other way. So the Rebbe said to learn Inyonei Geula Umoshiach and understand it, that goes together with the Inyan of wanting Mashiach mit an Emes. We should really want Mashiach, that we want Mashiach mit an Emes if we understand what it is. And there's another thing. When you learn, especially in the Sichos of the Rebbe, and you learn the Inyonim, the way the Rebbe describes and speaks about Mashiach, you see what it means to want Mashiach mit an Emes. When you learn the way the Rebbe describes Mashiach and the way the Rebbe talks about wanting Mashiach, the Sichos that we just heard now, if you hear it, it's even more than if you learn it in the Sicha. When you hear it and you listen to it and you read it, I feel it in the Hanochas of the Fabrengens, where there it's Poshet, the way the Rebbe said it, not only the Haskola Shebedover, Poshet, you see the way the Rebbe wanted Mashiach mit an Emes, and that gives an inspiration for us to also want Mashiach mit an Emes. That's one of the Inyonim of a Rebbe. Chassidim v'knamol sagen, what's the Inyon of a Rebbe? So he would give a moshel. I mean, Chassidim, those that didn't give the moshel the way I'm going to say it, but there was a moshel that you have, someone gives you something and you have to, and there are instructions how to do it, how to put it together. It's very hard. So sometimes what they would do is, they not only would give you instructions, they would give along a video that you play and you see, that shows you what to do. The Eibishter gave us HaTorah, the Eibishter gave us the book, and he gave us also a video to look at it, and that will see how to behave. That's a Rebbe. Rebbe, the Eibishter said down the Rebbe that that's the ultimate, the epitome of the way a Yid is supposed to be and what a Yid is, and from that we learn. So when we see the ways by the Rebbe, that teaches us, that's the video we have of how, what it means and how it's possible that we should want Mashiach mit an Emes. But there are a lot of stages here. It's not so simple to want Mashiach mit an Emes. Who are we? We're we should want Mashiach mit an Emes. We want a stick of chocolate cake. Das will man mit an Emes. Ice cream. Or sagen that we want Mashiach mit an Emes. How does it work? So there are a few stages here that we have to go through, which I was imagined. I'm just saying svaris. The first stage is that we have to take it serious. We have to know this is not so poshet, and we have to know those meint memir. Someone mentioned it before, one of the speakers, the famous story that the Rebbe told over. I remember at the Verbringen Yutvat of Shechov Hey. The Rebbe said he got the ksovim from Harav Perlov from Australia, and he wrote the maises that down that he remembers from Lubavitch. And the Rebbe repeated one of the maises that he said. And one of the things was that Amol Reb Michal der Alte was Verbringen with the Bochrim, and he gave a moshel. And he said, in a yishuv, in a village, the Eden were very poshet Eden, but they hired a malamed for their children. The malamed, but the people there didn't even know how to read. So if they ever got a letter or anything in Lashon Kodesh, in Yiddish, they couldn't read it, so they would ask the malamed to read it. So once the Yeshuvni got a letter, and he came to the Malamed to read it. And the Malamed is reading as a Kal Blutik. It says there that this person's father passed away. And that Yeshuvnik chalished, fainted. So Michal der Alter asked the question. The Yeshuvnik didn't see the letter. He couldn't read the letter. He heard it klesheni. He heard it from somebody else who read it in the letter. The guy who read the letter, he saw it in the letter. So he saw it first, and he saw it more authentic. He should have fainted, not the other guy. The answer is sein Tate. And the Rebbe kept on bringing the hero from here, Rab Gedenken, as his mein Tate. Mein Tate means it's negeya to me. And the Rebbe, months later, many Fabrengens, he would refer to this Meiser. And he would say, Vimi od geret, al mit Rab Gedenken, adas is mein Tate. So the first thing is we have to remember, as Bishaz the Rebbe said, that you have to strive and you have to get to the Matzav of Mashiach mit Emes, wanting Mashiach mit Emes, das meint mit Takemir. Because always we think that there's a problem. Sido a word in Yiddish, I don't mean Sido a word me. Midarf doston, midarf lernen. Who's the me? Midarf. We forget, sometimes, ich talking midarf, ich darf. I want to stand by for bringing when the Rebbe had spoke this Lekuda that Matzav Gedenke yourself. I overheard two young alike after the Sicha, between the Sichos, one turns around to the other. Das gehört, was the Rebbe gesagt. You heard what the Rebbe said. He tells the other guy. That's exactly what the Rebbe is saying. Don't tell somebody else. Das meint mir. So the first thing is we have to remember as das meint mir. So if you have that Emes guy, that's already a start. That meint mir, so I'm working on it. And also the next step, which I would think is to say that we could jump onto the wagon and say right away, I want Bashir B'tan Emes. Ich halte nicht bei dem. But al derech, like the Rebbe writes, when they not sleeping in the sukkah because you feel makif in the bina. And if you feel makif in the bina, you can't sleep, so you're mitztayer potem in a sukkah. So the Rebbe said, that's all the Rabbeim, the middle Rebbe felt it, so by him it was mitztayer. But Stam Chassidim, we don't feel makif in the bina. So the Rebbe said, so we're mitztayer, why we don't feel makif in the bina? Then he said, yeah, but I'm not mitztayer in that either. I couldn't care less. I'm mitztayer, why I don't feel makif in the bina. Yeah, but I'm mitztayer, why I'm not mitztayer in makif in the bina. That's also nishmat anemes. But sof kol sof, this is a derech. At least if I feel bad, why I'm not in that, it's a shame at sugaing. You say a story with Alter Rebbe that somebody was came to Alter Rebbe and asked, and said Eitzah for something. I don't remember the story exactly, the protein, but the Nekuda was, and he tells, he asked Brocha or Eitzah that what he does is maintenance nishmat anemes. He doesn't do it with a pnimius. And then he tells the Alter Rebbe, and this that I'm complaining that ich tue nicht mit Emes is echt nicht mit Emes. And then he went on, und das, was ich sage, als nicht mit Emes, das, was ich tue nicht mit Emes, is echt nicht mit Emes. And he went on, and finally he fainted. He got to the Emes. So we have to have that as long as it bothers us, he does not derech af going. So derech, like somebody came to the Tzemach Tzedek and he said, Rebbe, I have a problem. Ich hab Zweikes in der Munde. So the Tzemach Tzedek looks at him and he says, no, Meile. So big deal. What's the Zweikes in der Munde? Says, Rebbe, what do you mean? It's doch Sveikes in the Munde. Says, you could go. That it bothered him that he's Sveikes in the Munde is not really Sveikes in the Munde. That means that he really doesn't have Sveikes, because otherwise it wouldn't bother him. Maybe talk. So that's all a beginning that we have to have in getting closer to the goal, is at least if we feel that way. Then I want to say another Nekuda, which again, I'm thinking, the Rebbe said the problem is, Mishrait Ad Mosai, aber metutas mipnei hatzivui. So, what he was claiming, you do it because the Rebbe said to do it, but not that we make this in Emes. But I think if a person shreit Ad Mosai and he really badet Mashiach is not here, meint es, aber was meint nicht, weil badet Mashiach isn't here. He knows that it bothers the Rebbe so much, b'meile shreit. I don't think that that's what the Rebbe was shoylo when he said, Pnei Hatzivi means you push it. You tut was misogd there's no stone tustados without feeling. If you have a feeling that you know mir, ich weiß nicht, dass von Mashiach, but I know by the Rebbe and Chosed is kusha mit the Rebbe, so what bothers the Rebbe bothers me. I think that's called mit anemes. That's not called mipnei hatzivu. That's more than that. So derech we heintige hayem yem says in hayem yem that Ahavas Yisrael is so great. Why? Because Eyev Masha Ovev. You love a Yid because the Eibishter loves a Yid. Or you love the Eibishter because he loves a Yid. It should be direct. I shall love a Yid because I love a Yid. But if you love Eyev Masha Ovev, that's called loving. You love the Eibishter because he loves Eden and I love the Eden, or forget. Because if you do it because you know that bothers the Rebbe, but that's part of, I think, doing it with an Emes. So that's in a prat easier because it's something we could relate to, because we are Chassidim that if you know something bothers the Rebbe, bothers you. Something that you know that the Rebbe, so to speak, can't take, it bothers you. So in Mele, we could get this feeling that since it bothers the Rebbe, it bothers, and then automatically this will bring that you will take care about the Inyonei Mashiach. But I just also think that this year, especially in the beginning of the year, a year ago, the Rebbe sent us a practical lesson in how to really feel Ad Mosai. When this virus, Rahman al came, and whoever you spoke to, and anybody, every second that the person thinking was one thing, venture kommen asof to them, venture kommen asof to this virus. A talk, zwei, drei, we can't take it anymore. The Matzav, the way it was, you really felt that there is something that you were able to scream, Ad Mosai kipshuti begashmias. What we have to realize is that Golus is a virus. And by the Rebbe, this is exactly what he saw. The Golus is a virus, and he couldn't understand how there are people that don't care. Imagine by this terrible virus, someone will say, no, I don't care. There's all sign. Got to be a Meshuggah. And the way the Rebbe looked at it and expected everyone to look at it is this, you have to say, Ad Mosai mit Emes, because you have to feel it. The sort is we don't feel it, but if you learn the Inyonim that the Rebbe said, and you realize what it is, and by being the kushet of the Rebbe, so the Rebbe's Inyonim are pale, but pale mamish, so you could become and feel it. And therefore, the bottom line is that we have to make this cheshbon hanefesh and see what we do, who we halt of the Welt in them. And the first thing is to be serious about it. It says in Derech Chaim, the Mittler Rebbe writes that the Chili, he speaks about Kabbalah sale, Prika sale. He says, what's Prika sale? What's Kabbalah sale? He says, Hanikra Beloshen Yiddish Ernstkeit. That's the yesod of everything. Take it serious, so we know this is not Yeret wegen them. It's not just lip service. There's a Emes Zach, and das meint man mir, and it's possible. And everyone should start with Yerich in his madrege, and then we will reach the point where we feel it, but hopefully it won't take long. And the Eibusher should not even wait for that. We have to do ours, but the Eibusher will see that we're planning to do it. The moment we make a achlota that we're doing things meant with an Emes, it's like the Rebbe brings the halacha b'negei melchama, that when soldiers go to war, in order to win the war, you look for schusim, so they should fast. Elamah, you're not allowed to fast because you become weak. So the Rebbe brings from the Nil, from Shulchan Aruch, if they make a hachlota that after the war they'll fast, the Rebbe considers it as if it happened, and you win the war because of that hachlota. So here also, we're fighting a war. We're fighting a virus. We're fighting a war. We're fighting an enemy. We're fighting the Golus, which is the most terrible thing. And if we make a hachlota that we're going to work on what the Rebbe said is what will hasten Mashiach, the learning about Geula Umoshiach, which this mitzvah that's starting now is a Meire Dikazach, and we want to get to the point that we should main met an Emes, that achlota itself, the Eibusher will say, yes, that's what it is, and the Eibusher will bring the Geula Shleima, and we hope and pray that it should be not stam, like we heard in the Sicha before, not tomorrow, not a day later, not tomorrow, but even today, as we always daven and say, Belaz, we want Mashiach now. L'chaim, l'chaim.